Hi, it's Alex Woods here. I've just got back from Romford County Court and I wanted to tell people about a credit card case that I've been working on for a client for over about a year now. Because a lot of people have an idea that the payment protection insurance scandal has passed, that now you simply go to the bank to complain. If they reject your complaint, you then appeal it to the Financial Ombudsman Service. And the banks, in large part, have been successful in funneling any complaints about payment protection insurance through their own complaints procedures and then on to Financial Ombudsman Service. And they do not like it if consumers get other ideas about the way that their claim is being handled. Now, I'm talking to people out there who have, the minority out there who have complex claims. And a complex claim can be anything from a very old claim, as this one was, 1999, or it can be a complex claim, as is often the case, just off the top of my head. For example, secret commission type cases on second charge mortgages with through brokers, with non-status lenders. That sort of claim can be potentially a complex claim. And then there's also factually complex claims. The Financial Ombudsman Service is not the right tribunal, in my view, for adjudicating on issues of fact on the consumer's word against the banks. And my experience, it's not a huge experience, but I have a window in on a number of claims that I'm running through the Financial Ombudsman Service, is that the Financial Ombudsman Service, they're quite junior people. They're usually just out of law school. And they aren't very good at dealing with one word against the other. So if the bank's paperwork says, and I'm thinking now actually specifically about a case with Santander, where the credit card, the online credit card form has a box that you click to ask for payment protection insurance, and therefore it becomes optional. And the adjudicator says, oh, well, Santander or Co-op, whoever it is, have got a policy of only of inviting people to click yes. Now, when you've got a consumer who then says, well, actually, there was a phone call that followed up the application form in which it explained to me that it would be a good idea to tick yes, then you've got a whole different conversation. But the Financial Ombudsman Service adjudicators tend to, go with the path of least resistance, which is to simply say, yes, the bank's paperwork is in order. Do I really want to ring up a consumer who's going to give me an earful, and I'm going to have to separate fact from angst and anger about the missale and so on and so forth. And I've got a whole pile of claims here. So do I really want to go there and become, and I'm a young lawyer, do I really want to assess one word against the other? So the consumer's likely to suffer in those cases too. There are more exceptions. There are a minority of claims, but there are a plethora of exceptions, which means, in my view, that the banks and the Financial Ombudsman Service are not the right tribunal. One category which they're definitely not the right tribunal by anybody's standards is where you're defending potential repossession proceedings against a lender where you've been missold payment protection insurance, and typically they've refunded you the PPI, but they haven't done the proper recalculation. They haven't done the proper maths on what the real loss has been to you. They've given you a check. They've said, what's the problem? Stop stalling on repayments or else we're going to repossess. So that's quite a long prelude. I'm now going to just dip into the facts of the case briefly, and then I'm going to explain what happened at court, and then I'm going to conclude and look forward to the next steps. So the facts of the case briefly are a MBNA credit card, an old one, 1999, and the box on the paperwork was ticked no. The client didn't want it. It's taken us quite a long time to I should explain, sorry, that the winding the clock forward, the client complained to the banks. They settled his claim. They offered him £5,000, adjudicated in his favour. Then they increased it, and then he said, I'm not quite happy with this. I've had a look at my credit card statements, and I've done a mathematical calculation, an estimate, and 5,000 doesn't seem enough. So he asked for his statements going back to 1999. The account's still current. He hasn't been provided with those, nor has he been provided with a spreadsheet calculation that MBNA often produce of the schedule of the premiums added and the associated interest and so on. So they said, take it or leave it. Basically, as I say, they increased the amount by around about £2,000. So we go to court, so that's the brief facts of the case. We've now discovered that he did actually. We don't know, but we know that there was a phone call after he ticked the box no, in which he was invited to actually tick yes. Now, there's no record on any paperwork, documentation that's been disclosed by MBNA that reveals that. They just point to a telephone call that took place on a certain date, and they say that's when he agreed to it. I've been there before with that, and clearly what has happened is someone on a bonus has tried to flog the payment protection insurance by ringing the client and persuade him to try and take it. So that's the case, and today was quite interesting at Romford County Court because MBNA tried to split the trial of liability, guilt or whatever you want to call it in layman's terms, from the value. Because they don't want to, the bank's tactics in these types of claims is to push them, kick the can down the road as far as they possibly can. And they don't want to have to disclose commercially sensitive information. They don't even want to disclose statements that the client has right to, because they are his own data. They would rather not do any of that, so they like the idea of a split trial, because then the client faces higher costs from two separate sets of proceedings, plus it kicks the can down the road. The client has to wait that many more months or years sometimes for compensation. You can see what they're doing. So take it or leave it. We know we messed up with PPI, but here's all we're prepared to give you, £7,000. Our estimate is 19,000. And when you say, well, hang on, I want to look at your calculations to see how you arrived at the figure of £7,000, they're like, no, sorry, take it or leave it. And then they just pull up the drawbridge, batten down the hatches, drop the portcullis, and just totally stonewall. So then you have to issue proceedings. And this is where we are. So we had a victory today at Romford County Court insofar as the bank was not allowed to separate quantum and liability. It's oppressive to do so. The client wants to know, he wants a simple answer to his question, how did you arrive at the figure of £7,000? And I'd like to know. And I'd also like the data the statements on my account, so that I can do my own calculation and instruct my lawyers to do it. I just want fairness. I want to know that you've sufficiently calculated my quantum. So that's the outcome. So that was a good outcome in court, and MBNA will now have to disclose the statements and the method by which they calculated PPI on a credit card. So now, Al, I suppose the outcome, if you like, or the thoughts that one has going forward is that if you are someone who falls into any of these complex categories, whether it's a very old credit card where the quantum may be quite high. I mean, if the quantum had only turned out to be £12,000, I would have probably advised the client, our estimate that is, I'd have probably advised the client, you 12,000, 7,000, the cost and delay of court proceedings, probably better to take it and be pragmatic rather than go on some sort of a crusade. Look at your claim as an entrepreneurial activity in which you feel that you're entitled to proper compensation and you're prepared to fight for it, and the banks know that. So I think where you've got an old or complex or secured, in this credit card area, whether can be tricky, whether there's a dispute over the facts, what your word against theirs, mortgages, brokers, that perhaps 5% maximum of the total percentage of payment protection insurance complaints being made, then you would be wise to, and if not only is it a complex that falls in that complex category, but you think that you might get a proper, decent reward from bringing legal proceedings, in this case 19,000 potentially rather than 7. Even if we settle the claim early, we could settle at 15, the client is quids in. So those are the two issues. One is your claim complex, 2 is the sufficient value for it to be worth going forward to instructing a lawyer. So that's an update. It's, what is it, the 4th of December 2013. I've just returned from court. It's always good to get into court. Banks don't like to be hauled in front of a judge and be compelled to produce commercially sensitive documentation. So it's always good to be doing that. The next step will be a period of directions in which the parties have to comply with a certain timetable for disclosure of the statements, etc., the data, the exchange of witness statements, and then completing a pre-trial review sort of documentation, and then the trial itself. And if during that time, and that'll probably not happen before March, the trial, if during that time we have any issues with MBNA's intransigence over disclosure, for example, which is likely or possible, then you are entitled to make a standalone special application to court before March to have that issue that issue addressed. So there you go. I thought people might be interested in how lawyers and how the courts are getting on with the payment protection insurance issue. I did talk to my opponent, who was representing MBNA in court, and asked her how many of these claims there were in the county court system. She didn't think there were many, and I think that's generally true. The banks are managing to force consumers down the bank's complaints procedure route and the Financial Ombudsman Service route. But I do urge you to look carefully at the quantum, which is the fancy legal word for the value of your claim, when you're considering what to do about payment protection insurance, and perhaps whether to accept a cheque that you've received in the post, and you wonder whether or not it's that compensation has properly put you back in the position you would have been had you never been missold the insurance. That's all for now. I'll post again on this case hopefully in perhaps a couple of months' time.